Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. Now, the question I'm about to ask should be an oxymoron, but here goes. Is racial reconciliation possible for the Christian church? Now, as I said, that should be an oxymoron. Let me also say it's not, as long as pastors like this still refuse to address essential racial issues. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, please add it to the comment section. All comments are welcome. Now, first and foremost, let me tell you why. Let me go back to my picture here. This is Pastor John MacArthur. Now, you may say, why am I picking on John MacArthur? First, let me just say, yes, I'm picking on him because I'm going to share a video with you that will explain why I pointed him out. One, I have great respect for John, which is why I am bringing him up. I have John's Bible, the John MacArthur Bible, and so what I'm saying is that there is I was shocked in terms of when years ago when I began to do research and to really begin to ask why racism existed in the church. And yes, racism still exists in the church. This picture here is a very interesting picture. The black and white divide, and I'm using this picture to show that this divide still exists in the church today. This church was taken almost a century ago. If you look back, you'll see the cars. But here's what I want to point out: that picture is still um, 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 it still exists today. Actually, this picture was taken for about immigrants, to divide between immigrants. But what I want to say is, I look at this divide there that symbolically, this still exists in the Christian church. And why? One of the greatest mysteries to me that baffles me beyond control is why is the Church of Jesus Christ steeped with racism? Now, this picture, um, this was May 25th, 2020. It shocked the world. It grabbed the world's attention. I was gonna say that it changed the world, but I don't think it did too much changing. But it did grab the world's attention, and at least the possibility of change uh, is possible. But this church, of course, people recognize this officer had his knee on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And the world saw this and wondered. Now, as you can see, I can't even find pictures like this now for some reason. So at least it's hard. I screenshotted the video, of this. But that picture changed the world. And keep this in mind that this picture was taken during the rage of COVID-19. And uh, and so people ask, how could this happen in 2020? I always find questions like that funny. How could they not happen? In other words, if you ask a lot of black people, they would say that we've been trying to tell you. But the problem is that this racial issue in the church. Another issue that comes to bear is, of course, the election. And then as we've completed the election cycle, by the time of this taping, we have a president-elect. But the former president, President Donald Trump, he's so energized. And I want to say this: he made that divide even more pronounced. And I mean, even among Christians, which is a subject of another video that, again, pastors that even pastors who pastored, if not predominantly, black congregations with sizable black members that came out MAGA. That's another subject. But I want to kind of go back to say, I want to kind of go back to root causes. And one of the issues is, I'm going to go back to my picture here. This is John MacArthur, one of the leading evangelical pastors of the day, conservative. He's a Calvinist. He is in, a lot of people may not heard of him, but he's certainly in the news today because of his ongoing fight against California. He is in defiance of stay-at-home orders, or he is openly having church services. That's not what I want to talk about with him. I want to talk about the racial component of John MacArthur, and that's what kind of shocked me about pastors like him. Okay, I want to play a video. I'm going to bring up a video, and I want to narrate through a video, and then you will understand why I am, you can say, picking on Pastor John MacArthur. And let me also say why racial attitudes still exist in the church today. This video
movement really exploded.
All right.
And John asked
let me stop it for a minute.
if I would come to Mississippi.
And I'm going to go back a minute, but let me, this particular video was taken in, I believe around 2009. And and then it resurfaced the question. He told the story again a couple of years ago, about 2018. I want you to narrate. I want you to hear some of the things. I want to narrate through this because there's some points that I want you to bring out about his story here and why I'm bringing it out. Okay. All right. Let's go back.
Movement really exploded. And John asked me if I would come to Mississippi and if I would preach, if I would go around to the black high schools, which were totally segregated and always on the other side of town, and if I would preach and do some gospel ministry in these high schools around Mississippi. So I said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. Got a few friends. In those days, I used to sing a little, and we would do a little bit of singing together, and then I would preach. And I had an absolutely wonderful time. I can't remember exactly how many years. I think I went down there for a period of about 5 years, going down and spending a prolonged period of time. I lived with John and Vera May in their house, and very interesting to live at that time in the home of black people in the South, and to be treated the way they were treated, to be refused meals at a restaurant that I would go to because they knew who I was associating with. It was so tense there. There was
Okay, I want to stop. I want to let's get the setting here. What he's saying. For 5 years, he was preaching, doing Jim Crow at black churches. He was living on the black side of town, living in black homes, and as a result, he was treated the way black people were treated. Now, just keep this in mind. This is his story. And this video raises so many red flags for me. But I want you to see this. He says that, okay, he feels the black people's pain. That's what I want you to see now. He's living in their homes, living on this side of black town. Okay. Now, if you go to the South, what you will find still today, many southern cities, they are divided by a clearly defined black and white line, usually railroad tracks. Okay, but in some kind of way, you will know black part of town, white part of town. That goes back to segregation. During the civil rights struggle, there were whites who engage. In fact, the struggle could not have successfully ended without whites struggling, fighting alongside blacks to end Jim Crow. Now, he's not claiming to fight a civil rights march, but what he is claiming is that he hung out with some of the civil rights black people of the time. That's a red flag for me, especially coming from where he comes from. And I'm going to get to him later. I'm going to get to why I said that. But just keep in mind, he's talking about he's living with John Perkins, and he's living with different people who were involved in the struggle. I have questions about John when he says he was kind of not involved, but hanging out at the very least. Okay.
A friend of John's who was a custodian in the First Baptist Church in Mendenhall, which is a white church. This custodian loved Christ, and he built a friendship with the pastor of the church, even though he couldn't attend the church. The pastor started a Bible study with him on a regular basis, and the church leaders told him he had to stop that.
I want you to mark that statement. The church leaders told him to stop. That would have to be the white church leaders. That's crucial at this point to understanding now, to me, John MacArthur. All right? File that in the back of your head.
He said, I can't. And the circumstances became so overbearing on him. He had problems in the community, in the town, getting gas and things like that. He had a nervous breakdown. They took him to Jackson, put him in a hospital room, and he dove out of the window of the third floor and killed himself. That's how.
Now, again, to me, a red flag. When ministers tell stories, and I'm used to ministers telling wild stories such as I've been visited by angels, or I've had this supernatural experience and stuff. And here's my thing. Almost without exception, these stories are not verified. Now, a pastor of John MacArthur's stature, it is hard to believe he would just make up a story. Okay? But I have red flags, and we're gonna tell you why. But listen.
Intense that was. Well, it was during those times that I was there, and I will never forget. I can't tell you a whole story, but I never forget one night I was in the middle of Jackson, Mississippi, in the office of a man named Charles Evers.
Now, let me stop. So at this point now, and I'm going to set this up because when he says, I can't tell you the whole story, again, this is April 4th, 1968. This is the night Martin Luther King is shot. This is important. When you tell a story, but this is important now. Now watch this.
Charles Evers had a brother named Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was the first martyr of the civil rights movement. He was the first person killed. Charles became the first black mayor of the first black mayor in the South, Fayetteville, Mississippi. He was a friend of John's, and I had come to know him, and we were sitting there, and he was trying to explain to me that night in Jackson what was going on. And I remember I was a very young guy. I had become immersed in that culture, grew to love those people, and Charles was talking, and a man burst through the door and said, Martin Luther King has been assassinated.
Okay.
That happened that night while I was there with Charles and John and some others.
Okay. So let's let's again unpack this. He says the first martyr of the civil rights movement was Medgar Evers. Not true. I'm not going to make a palm over that, but it is not true. A guy by the name of Johnny Moore probably is more likely to be the first martyr of the civil rights movement, and that would have happened at this point over 15 years prior, in 1951. Again, I'm not going to squash that. what I'm going to say is the reason why I'm making an issue out of it is because when you tell a story and you kind of where your facts coming from, how are you regulating the story? And the other thing is, remember he's sitting in a room as he's saying it with Charles Perkins, Charles Evers, okay, and uh, on April 4th. Now get this, April 4th, 1968. Somebody burst in the room and announced Martin Luther King has been shot. All right, let me go on.
And the immediate issue was that there were serious things going on in the street in Jackson, and they were trying to get me out of there because I was as pale as a ghost. And they were worried about what might happen to me. And so they escorted me, and then they said, you know, we're going to go to Jackson.
Okay, they escorted him where? And let me just say this again. There was no really. First of all, what threat was there to him? And from whom? From black people? There was no widespread reports of rioting in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, there were riots that broke out in several major cities as the news spread of Martin Luther King's assassination. But not Jackson. Not certainly enough to where they were saying, oh my God, we are so concerned about you, white boy. Right? No. And then it said they escorted him for fear that what? Black people were going to kill him or retaliate? Where was the threat? Okay, red flags.
We're going to go to Memphis. We want to see what happened. So they took me. And in those days, the police weren't nearly as protective. Forensics hadn't developed to what they had, and they didn't necessarily protect crime scenes. So we went to the motel, up to the landing, saw the blood, where Martin Luther King had been shot just hours before by James Earl Ray. I actually went to the little building opposite the motel, went up onto the second floor, stood up on the toilet, and looked out the window where James Earl Ray had shot him. And I was there at that very, very, very crucial time. Make a long story short.
Let me stop and unpack that because, again, here's some problems. Here's some problems with this. According to what he just said, and there's a lot to unpack here. And like I say, it was a lot that there was. Let me just say this. According to him, he says, first and foremost, he's in the office of Charles Evers, Medgar Evers' brother, which means he would have had to been in the house, in this office, around 7, 8 o'clock, right? 8 o'clock around that time. Martin Luther King was assassinated around 6 in the afternoon as they prepared to go to dinner. So the idea was that the news, he gets shot in Memphis. So as news would have spread, and the fact that Charles would have been notified, okay, not disputing that. But it's certainly, you have to remember, we're talking, when that event happened, right? So what, this is talking about 6 o'clock. So what, at best he would have been notified, let's say around 7, right? 8, enough for people to start, my God, what's going on? Of course, at the scene, who would they have called, right? When did the news people get there, okay, and show up and start broadcasting, right? So let's just say at least 7. Now that's important. That's important here. So now they're worried about, he said escort them. I don't know where they would say escort, but he said now they're worried about his safety. Oh my God. We're worried about your safety, John. Again, from whom? Black people? Right? Black people? Are you worried about black people? it was and remember, it was the whites that he had to worry about for him being associated with black people, living among black people. And again, I'm going to come back to that point. Like I said, red flags. Now he says that they jump in the car and they drive to Memphis. That's like a 3-hour drive, three and a half hour drive from Jackson to Memphis. So let's just say from what? So that meant that would have put them in Memphis around what? 10, 11 o'clock, maybe 12, right? In other words, okay, wow, right? Then he says this. There wasn't, they were a little lax about crime scenes. Maybe. However, you really want to believe that he could drive up on a major national worldwide event, the assassination of the leading civil rights leader of the day. They all knew it at the time. Everyone knew. And he's saying that they just waltzed in the crime scene, walked up on the balcony. The blood, right? The blood, right? He got shot. Remember, Martin Luther King got shot in his neck. Massive blood flow. And they're standing in it, he says. Ew, but they're standing in it. And no cop is saying, get away from the crime scene, even in 1968. And then he says, he goes over and stands where they believe the gunman, James Earl Ray, stood and perched himself on the toilet. Now, a couple of things. They believe that he was in a bathtub, first of all. Now remember, because he said he stood on the toilet. James Earl Ray, according to where they believe he shot, because they saw footprints in the tub, okay? But even more than that, would they have said, okay, by this time, we know where he shot from? Now, if you look at a picture, I'm not going to show, if you look at the picture, when Martin Luther King is shot, they point to the direction. But you mean to tell me that by the time that John arrived, which would have been 11, he's able to, in the dark, at night, go in and stand in the bathroom on the toilet that didn't exist. But let's just say, okay, minor detail, get off. Let's say if he stood in the tub, that he's able to, just hours, what he said, just hours, he's able to also see the line of sight where Martin Luther King was assassinated. Yeah. Okay. My question is, this man who is of a great stature, why would he make up this story? It just didn't happen. This is my conclusion. It just didn't happen. But let's go on, because I'm going to get you where I really wanted to tell this story.
When we went back and endeavored to continue to do what we were doing, we were driving down a country road headed to one of the high school meetings, and we were arrested and taken to the jail and accused of fomenting trouble and all of that. So, there's a lot to say about it. You want short answers, but
you can elaborate.
But some good things came out of that.
Now I want you to stop, because he goes back and he's saying he's still preaching. This is around 1968. And he is again, remember what he said here. He's preaching. He's getting arrested. He's being treated like freedom fighters. Now, freedom fighters for both white and black. In fact, of all races, genders, male, female, okay? They were arrested. Yeah, they were arrested. Some were murdered. Some were beat. Now, John is saying, because of his association, because he was preaching, right? Because he was preaching, he was treated like them. All right, file that, because I'm getting ready to tell you why that's troubling to me.
There were some wonderful young people in John's ministry who wanted to go to a Christian college, and I knew about Los Angeles Baptist College, which was the name of the master's college then, and I said, well, I know a college near our church. I'm sure you could send them there. So I think we sent 3 or 4 of these young men to be trained and to graduate from the master's college before I had any association with them at all. It was called Los Angeles Baptist College. So I understood something of the inside of that, and I think that tenderized me toward the whole thing because I saw a very, very clear dose of reality of how things really were. And John went on to continue his ministry there, and the men who were here educated went back. I just talked to 2 of them a couple days.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right here. I actually want to correct myself and I said Charles Perkins. I should say John Perkins, but Charles Evers. All right. Here's the problem that I'm going to have with Pastor MacArthur. So if you notice, he said what came out of that, the good that came out of that, there were several black men that he sent to, at the time, Los Angeles Bible College. And since then, I think he's taken it over now. It's called the Masters College. Okay, now fine. Here's my question: why did you send them there? Now let's stop. Let me explain why, and let me explain why that I think that this story is troubling. That I don't understand. That he tries to paint himself in a light that is false, plain and simple. And this is why. Now, at the beginning, I asked the question: can racial reconciliation is racial reconciliation possible in the Christian church? And here's my answer: no, as long as you do not deal with the issue of racism. And let me put my thing back up here because, again, remember, this whole video says that he was with the black community um, the night that Martin Luther King was dying. Here's another interesting thing, and uh, Charles Evers, the brother of Medgar Evers, that he said he was in the office with, denies completely the event. He said it didn't happen. He said he wasn't. Not only wasn't with John MacArthur, he was by himself. He drove to Memphis by himself. He wasn't there. And then later he even tells that, and he even denies even knowing John MacArthur. Okay, this is Charles Evers. He denies it. All right. So again, why does John MacArthur? Why would he make up a story? And not only that, but why would he make up a story that is so easily disproved? Question mark. But here is the bigger issue for me. Let me go back to my meme. All right, here's my meme. So I think he told the story and he made the story up to make himself look, I guess, put in a better light. This is my opinion, since we haven't talked with him and we haven't had statements on this. Here's the problem again, though. I am more interested. Notice the left side there. I am more interested, see, in what he said to the white community. See, and all that story that he tells on the black side of town, how he was almost a victim and had to be protected as a white man, and how he was doing this. And then, watch this. So now he says he feels what black people feel. Do you not? Because now let's back up. And this is why I decided to address John MacArthur. This is why we have to talk about racial reconciliation, because we have to kind of go back and why on earth did racial prejudice, racism exist in the Christian church in the first place? And John was a part of that. You see, when I say that I am more interested, the night that Martin Luther King was shot and that John puts himself kind of on the civil rights on the civil rights platform there, hanging out with civil rights. And by the way, Charles Evers and John Perkins, these people were, they wasn't just sitting around, they were radical. They were so radical today. People like Fox News will call them agitators, right? They would treat them. By the way, the people today would treat them just like they treat Black Lives Matter. Let me just give you that thing right there. But let's kind of go back and look at during this time that John says that he was hanging out with black folks, that he was feeling their pains, he was eating chitlins and hammocks. I'm kidding, right? But he was hanging out right there. If that's true, if that's true, then why would you attend Bob Jones University, a college? Now get this, a college that refused the very black people that you hung out with. A college that until 2007 refused to even repent of their racism. A college that the Christian right movement was birthed from. A lot of people think that the Christian right movement was birthed from abortion issues and gay issues. No, it was birthed in their support to say, Bob Jones, you have a right to discriminate against black people. You're black brothers and sisters in the Lord. Okay? John went to that school. And when he talks about college, when he talks about churches, I'm more interested then in saying, hey, did you go to your white community? Did you go to your right town? Did you go to your white church? Did you go to your white college and say, you all are wrong for having racial hatred and racial feelings towards your black brothers and sisters? Of course, any person of race, right? Other than the white race. But especially, of course, the topic of the day was how white people hated black people enough to segregate from them. And even worse, how Christians erected churches and denominations, the Southern Baptist denominations, how they erected colleges where John went. And he participated. Why? I'm more interested in what he said to them, having lived with black people. I'm more interested in saying, hey, John, what did you say to the good old boys? Huh? Because understand that the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1965. Most denominations did not even repent or address their racial sin to 30 plus years later. Southern Baptist in the mid 90s. Bob Jones, 2007, when they finally said, we were wrong with that. We were wrong. So my point to John MacArthur, and remember, he repeated this story 2 years ago. He told it in 2009. He repeated it at 2 years ago in 2018. Almost verbatim, repeated the same story. John then goes to California, go to the whitest part of California, right, and starts his church. If you look at the camera scene of his church, and you will find it is one of the whitest churches around. I'm more interested, what are you saying to your white church? We were wrong. Huh? And how are you addressing, the racial issues today? Not just responding, how are you addressing the issue of race? That is my question. And I'm more interested, not the fact that, again, that the story that he says, the story that he proclaims, um, the story he proclaims, again, is not adding up. Okay? It's not adding up. But okay, fine. But still, if you're taking the time to say, I feel black people, really? Are you? That's my perspective, guys. And the conversation needs to continue, right? And we are going to continue it in other videos. So that's my perspective. And as always, don't forget to like and share this video. And if you have a thought or comment, please add it to the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Till next time, I'll see you then.